Yes.
Hold on. Hold on 1 second. All right, so we'll try this again. Thank you so much for joining us from the campus of Belhaven University. We are in the health science career cluster. I've got a room full here at Velma Jackson High School, and we are recording this for our friends at Rosa Scott, Ridgeland High School, and Germantown High School. And we are just watched some videos about athletic training. We looked a little bit about what you do over there at Belhaven in the Department of Dance, and how it is athletic trainers are important because of the prevention of injuries, the rehab of injuries, the care of injuries, and making sure everybody's at a peak performance and safe. And I know you got a 2 degrees from George Mason University up in the Washington, D.C. area. So why don't you take us through your path? You came through in Virginia and getting here into Jackson.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. First off, I really appreciate it. So I had no idea what athletic training was when I was in high school. But then senior year of high school, I found out that high school students could be like a student aide to the athletic trainer and kind of just learn about athletic training. And so I was like, yeah, let's do that. So for 2 days for football, I went for those 2 weeks and helped out. And I just fell in love with it. I've always loved being with people and just building relationships with people. And I've also loved the body and just figuring out kind of how it works. And so after those 2 weeks, I ended up staying on the whole year and just worked with them and learning from them. And then I decided that I wanted to go to George Mason University and major in athletic training. And so that's where I started my undergrad. And I had a whole bunch of different clinicals. I got to work with Georgetown lacrosse and some different high schools. And then junior year, I told my advisor that I wanted to work with dancers, even though I didn't really know athletic trainers worked with dancers. But she said, yeah, go talk to this professor. So I went and talked to him, and he ended up setting up a clinical site with the George Mason School of Dance. They have an athletic trainer that works with them. And so I spent a whole semester learning from her. And after that experience, I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I know this is exactly what I want to do. So after that, I started doing research in dance medicine as well to kind of stay in that world. And so I just worked the rest of my senior year, the rest of my undergrad degree, trying to get into dance medicine. And so I ended up staying for my master's degree at George Mason, again, working with dance stuff. In 2019, I went down to the University of North Carolina School of the Arts for 2 weeks to work with their dance summer intensive. And so I got a little bit more work with them. And then 2020, the world shut down, but I got my master's degree in May. And so I was applying for jobs, and this job popped up, and I was like, well, we'll try it. I didn't know or think if I was going to get it, but I ended up getting the job. And so I've been here. All I've known is COVID. And so I've been here since August 2020. And yeah, that's how I got down here to Jackson, Mississippi.
That's awesome. Now, I was looking at the degree program that you went through at George Mason, and I'm sure it's similar across the board because we have had some students say they're interested in this type of work. But it's important to know that the science basis is extremely important. Yeah, you have to know, if you're doing football, you have to at least know where the injury came from, or lacrosse, or in your case, dance. You have to be somewhat familiar with the activity, but you have to be an expert on the human body. Obviously, you're not a doctor, you're not writing prescriptions, but you have to know where the injury came from. You have to know how to prevent it. And a person's body, in a lot of cases, is their moneymaker. So you have to be able to make sure they stay safe and stay productive. So if somebody was looking to get into this, what would they really need to focus on as far as these science courses and being an expert on anatomy and physiology?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So at Mason, we took, like, as our basis before we even started going to clinicals, we had to take 2 semesters of anatomy and physiology. And so that wasn't just like muscles and bones and stuff. It was more like at the biological level, understanding like what cells are doing and the different types of cells that we have, because a cell that is made up in the liver is not the same type of cell that makes up a ligament or a tendon even. And so we had to take that and pass that course. And then once we got more into the athletic training side, we had to take a functional anatomy course. So that was where we really like learned the muscles. We had to know all the muscles. We had to know all the bones like in the back of our head. And then being able to understand what those muscles do. So what functions do they do like in normal life? I needed to know like in a lunge, like the quads and the hamstrings are working and, you know, the types of things like that. So I would say if you can focus on anatomy and physiology, if you're looking to be like a physical therapist or an athletic trainer, some type of functional anatomy is going to be really helpful because you're going to learn about concentric and eccentric contractions and like all of that stuff. And then again, if you want to be a AT or a PT, you'll get more specific into like lower extremity injury evaluations or like what exactly happens with different type of injury mechanisms. So that's a little bit more specific, but I would say anatomy for sure, physiology, and then some type of functional anatomy would probably be really helpful.
Yeah. And then another thing, and I think on pretty much any health science career, and, you know, we were just saying, you can't be scared to touch people. You know, you're gonna have to move part. You know, you're gonna have to stretch people out. You're gonna have to feel where there's pain to see if there's any type of swelling. You're gonna have to wrap ankles, wrap knees, wrap elbows. So you have to be one. You got to be comfortable with doing that, and two, you got to be really good at it because on the preventative side, you know, in your case dealing with dancers, if somebody you know is going to be landing on their ankle, you have to make sure that ankle is wrapped correctly.
Right. Yeah. And in school, you're going to be taping and you're going to be touching a lot of different bodies because each body doesn't feel the same. Each muscle doesn't feel the same. And so being able to like understand that, like my dancers ask me, like I can start to feel when there's a trigger point or where there's a tight muscle. And they're like, well, how do you know that? I'm like, because I've touched a lot of, I've touched a lot of bodies, you know? And so, yeah, you have to be comfortable with that. If you don't like touching feet, if you don't like touching knees, I don't know if this is going to be the career. You're going to have to,
you know, all those ankle injuries in basketball. I mean, those guys getting their feet touched every day by those trainers.
Yes, exactly. So you have to be comfortable in doing that. And you have to be just, again, comfortable in that anatomy, because if someone comes in and says, hey, this is hurting, well, I need to know in the back of my mind, like, okay, what are the structures that could be injured right now, and kind of go through that checklist. If I don't know my anatomy, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah. And that also goes back to, you may not be a dancer yourself, but you know enough about what they're doing to know that, you know, they were doing this is probably what caused that, because trainers are basically first responders, because and I referee a lot. And whenever there's an injury, that trainer has to diagnose immediately what's going on. So obviously you do the preventative side and the rehab side, but the first responding side is so huge, especially with so much safety at risk.
Right. Yeah, I know it is really huge. I am lucky enough that I have been dancing my whole life, so I understand their language. But even if you haven't been like, you know, with soccer, if you've never played soccer before, you still need to do the research in order to understand what movements they're doing. So even if you've never danced before, I would suggest you even just watching a class. Like, their movement quality is so extreme. It's not like a football player. It's not like a basketball player. You need to understand like the baseline of every sport that you're going to do. So then that gives you a better idea of what could be coming. But yeah, we are the first responders. You know, when someone goes down, my faculty call me and say, hey, someone went down. And so I have to go upstairs and check and kind of just look at the scene, what's going on first, and then look at them and be like, okay, is this an emergency? Like, do I need to call 911, or is it something, are they like breathing okay? Like, and then I go up to them and be like, are you okay? Like, can we like stand up, and maybe we need some crutches or something, but just kind of do a quick assessment and be like, okay, I can assess you a little bit later once we get down to the clinic or something. But yeah, I definitely consider athletic trainers like first responders.
Yeah, and the thing about, and I'm not sure the performance schedule, but are you traveling with the dance group and at all the performances and all of that, or are they using other staff? Because that's a part of athletic training as well. You know, if you want to be on the sports side, the games are at night, the games are on the weekend, the performances are at night. So how does that schedule work?
Yeah, so I'm here 8 to 5 every day. So if they ever need anything, I'm here. Normally I do rehab or some type of injury evaluation, but then on performance days, yeah, I'm here for all the performances. I'm here for all of the dress rehearsals. We don't really travel much. But when I was with lacrosse or high school teams, we traveled with them. We had to pack up our bags and go. And so, yeah, you're kind of at the mercy of the this training schedule. So if you don't like working nights, maybe don't work at a high school because you're going to be there late. Maybe a PT setting is a little bit more, a little bit better. But yeah, I'm here for all dress rehearsals and performances in case something happens.
Yeah. And now, how transferable are the skills in athletic training from different areas? So let's say, Belhaven calls you tomorrow and say, look, you do a great job with dance. We want you to help out with basketball. Just theoretically, I know they have their own person, but theoretically, how easy would that be to transfer?
Yeah. What I like to say is the body is the same. Everybody's body has the same muscles, tendons, all of those things. It's just the way that we stress them is different. So if I'm coming from dance and we're in extreme range of motion, I'm like, okay, that's cool. But then basketball, I have to understand that there's a lot of twisting and there's a lot of quick movements that are going to be different than dance. Dance is very calculated. They practice the same thing over and over, so they know what's coming. In basketball, you're going to be running down the court and you don't know where the offender is coming from. And so being able to understand that there's going to be things that might happen that player wasn't expecting. And so injuries can come from that. But so then that can kind of help me understand maybe the mechanism of the injury a little bit better so that I can help evaluate it a little bit better. But the body's the same. So.
But the good news is also, if you're a trainer, you always have the best seat in the house because you get to sit, you're backstage, you get to see them, and if you're in the sport, you get to sit on the sideline. So that would be a cool perk.
I love it.
Just a few things before I get to some of the students' questions.
Sure.
Is how competitive is this degree program? I know you went in the Washington, D.C. area, obviously in a major city, and the DMV had, with all those people, there's obviously in a huge school. I know George Mason's a large university. How competitive are these programs to get into and then to find employment getting out of?
Yeah, the program has changed a little bit since I graduated, but I would say it is competitive. I think the hardest part, honestly, like at George Mason, when you say you're coming in for athletic training, you don't have to take another test to get into the program. You're kind of just in the program. But I will say that a lot of people get into athletic training, but then a lot of people don't stay because it is really difficult. The anatomy, all the evaluation stuff, all the class, like the rehab, we have to know about modalities, all of those things are really difficult. And so if you don't have a love for it, then you kind of just get left behind. Right. So I think that's where some of the competition can come in. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. Right now they're in kind of a master's degree. So that can get a little bit more competitive, but I would say your love for it will have to push you through it because otherwise it's going to get really taxing.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I hear a lot of young people, I've heard this for years. They say they want to work in the health science field because they think it's a lot of money. But, if you're looking at it from that perspective, I don't care what area you're going to get in, you're going to fail at it because people's lives are at stake, people's safety is at stake, people's money is at stake. And there's not a whole lot of margin for error when it comes to people's safety and people's and fixing injuries, especially when you're on the professional level, you're looking at people losing millions of dollars that they can't perform. So you can't just do it and say, yeah, this pays a lot of money. You have to be an expert in these fields.
Right. And athletic training, unfortunately, we don't make as much money, I think, as everybody thinks we do. We work a lot and we probably are overworked. A lot of athletic trainers get burned out because we don't always get the necessary pay that we're putting the work into. So that's, kind of one side of it. But I think in terms of what you were saying about the competitive in the job, I think athletic trainers are always going to have a job because we can work not only in sports, but we have people in the industrial settings with NASA or Amazon, or there's always places where we can kind of help because like you said, we do preventative work. So you might not be running out on a court or in a dance studio, but helping you ergonomically with at Amazon or NASA or an airline.
The military's got a huge need for them as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so we can always kind of be a help into that.
And I know you said you don't make as much as people think, but at the same time, you also don't have to spend 7 years of postgraduate work trying to get certified.
Correct.
So it is a much faster track to begin work, and you're not going to have as much debt as your surgeon over here.
Yeah.
They may make way more money, but they're going to take a lot longer to get there.
Definitely.
So
Yeah.
that's definitely a pro. Now, before we get to these questions, obviously we'd be remiss, me being a referee, I can maybe remember 3 female athletic trainers I've ever met. And I can only remember 4 Black athletic trainers I've ever met. And this is in 18 years of official. So how important is this diversity in this field? Because it is a male dominated field and it is a white dominated field. So how important is it to get more women and more minorities into this field? Because obviously there's a need for it. With the growth of female sports and the female dominated arts and things like that. So how important is it to get more diversity in this area?
I think it's super important. I had maybe 4 Black professors my entire 6 years of college. And especially within dance, I may be one of like 5 to 10 people that I know that are like clinicians with dancers. So there really isn't a lot of diversity. I never saw somebody in my position right now when I was in school. Like I never saw that. And so diversity is really important to me so that I can be like, kind of a role model for someone coming up, just being like, you can do this. Like, we are here. We are doing this. It is difficult, but we need you to come and do this as well. I didn't know that there were so many Black athletic trainers, but I got in a group chat and I see them now. And it's so beautiful just to see all of this color and all of this just diversity in so many different settings. It's beautiful, but we need more of it. And so I think even though sometimes my position is hard and it can get really difficult, I understand that I'm not just here for me. Like, I'm here for that little girl or that little boy that wants to get into athletic training and wants to do something with performing arts, and just be a light and a voice to them and just be like, we're here. We are present, we are existent, and you can do it too.
Yeah, and just for females, to me, just thinking, if a female dancer is injured, she may be more comfortable with a female athletic trainer. Even
totally.
if obviously they're not touching them inappropriately, but they may be more comfortable speaking to a female about where her body hurts. Because it could be just a comfort thing. So that's important to have more females to be able to deal with the females, because there's no telling how many females have been injured where they haven't disclosed it because they weren't comfortable talking to a male. So that's extremely important as well.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I understand too that I have male dancers here and they might not be comfortable telling me something, but I think it's being open with them and making them feel comfortable. They have to trust me first before they can even open up about anything. And so that's really important for me, just to get to know them on a individual basis and just be like, I am here for you. I think as women, we bring something that's really helpful in that, like, we are nurturers, we care a lot, I think. And so I try to bring that into this place and just be like, yeah, I care about you getting better from your injury, but I also care about you as a whole person. And so I think that is helpful for them to be able to then trust me to, help them out, and they can kind of just talk and things.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because obviously the scientific side is extremely important, but you got to have the communication skills. You got to be able to listen, and you got to be able to talk to people. These kids want to get so mad when I make them present stuff. It's not to be mean. I don't care what job you have, especially if you're doing anything with people. You have to be able to talk. You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to know, here's why you got hurt. Here's what you need to do. You're not speaking in front of a crowd, but you got to be able to communicate with people clearly and effectively, especially when you're dealing with people's safety. But I do have some questions from the students, and these are all ninth graders, and some of these are good, so good luck with that. This is a good one. This is Danielle, and she asked, have you ever dealt with someone that wouldn't listen to you and injured themselves again when you knew they were injured?
Yeah. I have. Yeah, that's an interesting position to be in, because obviously I've gone to school for this. I have practiced this. I think I have a decent understanding of what the injury is, but to be honest, sometimes when people get injured, they think they know exactly what's wrong, and that's okay. And so I also realize I'm dealing with adults here in college. And so if there's ever a question on what I believe should happen, I always give them the opportunity. I'm like, hey, you're an adult. and you can make that decision if you want to go against what I say. And I have had some people do that, and they do get a little bit more injured. And so you kind of just have to have some grace with that and not come back and say, I told you so. Like, I told you I was right. Even though that might be what I want to do. But you kind of just have grace and forgive them and just be like, okay, like, so that wasn't the best idea. And so hopefully we learn from that and we move forward and we don't do it again.
Yeah, and that goes back to the communication skills. You have to know how to communicate. You did your part. They didn't listen. Now you got to communicate again. Now this is Brian McMurtry, and he asked, "Have you ever had somebody come in that was was injured more seriously than they originally thought?"
Yeah, I think so. It's hard. It's really hard because sometimes people will come in and they say, oh, I'm hurt. And I can only go based off what you tell me. I can't say you're more hurt than, like, oh, are you faking it? I don't know. You told me what you're feeling, so I'm gonna go based off of that. And so I have had people come in and kind of just be like, oh, it's nothing. And I'm like, actually, we should maybe look into this a little bit further. And I've especially had that sometimes when students have come in and told me something, and then I get a phone call or email from their parents, and their parents is like, actually, this is what they told me. So the stories don't always add up. And so then I have to go in and dig a little bit more and be like, okay, so this is what you're actually feeling. That's a little bit different than what you told me. So again, communication, being able to communicate with that person, like, hey, I need you to tell me everything, even if it seems dumb to you or something. Like, I need more information than less information. So yeah, I have had them come in and kind of downplay injuries before, for sure.
I'm sure even on the professional athletes, I know those guys lie every day.
Oh, definitely, because you want to play.
Yeah, and there's money at stake.
Yeah.
Now this is Christian Dawson, and he asked, how do you evaluate a dancer's readiness to make sure they are good enough to resume physical activity?
These are really good questions. So whenever I evaluate them and diagnose them with the injury, we'll start to do some rehabilitation. So what I typically want from them is I need to make sure that they can do everything normally, what they would be doing in a class before clearing them. So if they are supposed to be jumping really big, then they need to be jumping with me without any pain, without any type of like, I don't really like that. Like, you need to be able to do everything full out. And if you can't, then that's okay. But that just means we need to take a little bit more time, and you just need to heal a little bit more. So we do it gradually. I try to have them not sit and do nothing, if possible. So they're always doing something with me, and then I'll go and watch class and be like, okay, this is what you need to be doing. So let's start out at the base. Let's just start out with like a little bit of plie or whatever, and then we'll gradually progress where you need to get to. So, yeah.
That makes sense. I didn't think about that. This is Alonzo Johnson, and he asked, what was the most challenging part of your college coursework?
There's a lot of memorization. So the bones and muscles for me were okay. Like that, I enjoyed that. I think one of the hardest parts, we had to take a pharmacology class where we learned about, like, what does an anti-inflammatory do? Like, how does it actually work? And so having to memorize that and understand that in different types of like drugs and stuff was kind of difficult. And then also just, trying to memorize, like, okay, so how does an MCL sprain happen? And then how do I evaluate to make sure that it is actually an MCL sprain, but it's not an ACL sprain? And it's not, so just memorizing all of that, because when someone gets injured, I have to think immediately, okay, let's start thinking about what could have happened. Okay, what do I need to do? What tests do I need to run? And then get to a conclusion. And so when I'm doing that for 8 hours a day, it just gets a lot. So I'd say the memorization, but once you start to do it more and you practice it more, it becomes kind of muscle memory, and it's not as.
Yeah. And I would say that would be in any health related field, because the memorization with the human body, if you want to be a nurse, you want to be a physical therapist, doctor, you've got to memorize all that stuff. So I think it's important for anybody watching now and later, if you ever want to deal with anything with the human body, you're going to have to memorize a lot of stuff.
Definitely. And I would say you don't have to know it like you need to know it, but like I still have flashcards. If there's something that like I have, if I forget something or if I need to look into something more, I pull out a flashcard or I look at a chart and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's what it is. But you need to be able to know it.
Yeah.
So
No, this is Quintus McKay, and he asked, how many people do you deal with a day?
that varies, but I'll say probably anywhere between 6 to 10 students or more a day. If we're around performance time, I can have every slot filled. So from 9 to 4 p.m., that's, I don't know, however many slots. So that's 2 an hour. So 14 slots or so. Yeah. So it can be up to 15-ish people.
No, this is a My Addiction, and she's one of our dancers here at the school, one of our Blue Diamonds. So she's got a background. So, but she asked, were you ever injured as an athlete, and did that push you to be an athletic trainer?
Yeah, I have been very fortunate in that I haven't gotten injured much, which is a miracle, but I did injure my SI joint at dance one night. So that's a part of your hip. It's like in the back. I fell and just kind of hurt it a little bit. And so I went I went through rehab and everything. I was like, this is kind of interesting, like just how the PTs came up with everything and all of that stuff. And so I think that did have some impact on me going into athletic training school. So.
All right, now this is an interesting one, and I want to know this myself. This is Tristan Williams, and he asked, what's the worst injury you've ever seen?
Worst injury I've ever seen. So this was during school. I was at a football game, high school football game. And I can't remember if we were on defense or not. But anyway, the play was going and basically all the students, all the players like dogpiled and the referees weren't calling it, like they didn't stop the play. They just all dogpiled on each other. And so my student was at the bottom. And so everyone was getting off. We're like, okay, cool. And then my student didn't move. And we're like, okay. So we ran out there and we turned him over and he was kind of just like, kind of still, like he was alive and everything. But we look at his leg and his leg was broken. The lower part of his leg, like it didn't break through the skin or anything, but you could tell that it was like, it did not look right. And that was the first time I'd ever seen a broken leg in person. And so we had to call the ambulance and because he was in shock, he couldn't feel it at all. And so he wanted to stand up and keep playing. He was like, oh, I want to stand up. And we were like, no, you actually need to stay. And so we splinted him and sent him to the hospital. He had surgery and then he got compartment syndrome, which is where the blood and the pressure increases too much in the lower extremity. And so they had to have him get another surgery to release the pressure. So yeah, that was pretty interesting.
For instance, all right, I've got two more. This is Terry Thompson, and he asked, is it hard to tell someone that's been working hard that they can't perform?
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had to do that recently. I had a student that got news that she broke her foot. And so we had to tell her like she was done for the rest of the semester. And I've had to tell a couple people that over the past 2 years, and it is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
That would be tough. I mean, and I know if that's hard, then just imagine, having to tell somebody their career's over, so there is that person that's extremely important. All right, it's got one more. This is Jasmine Williamson, and she asked, what is something you've had to learn fast on the job just to keep up?
Ooh, fast on the job. Okay, I will say that I had to learn that the dancers here, so they are dance majors, which means that their coursework is made up of dance classes. So if we think about like football, basketball, that's kind of like an extracurricular, like they're here on scholarship, but if they break their leg, they can't perform, but they can still go to class. Yeah. If my dancers get hurt and they can't perform in their dance class, then they have to drop their dance class, which means that they then are moved back a semester.
Oh.
So then that puts a little bit more pressure on me to figure out, okay, can this person keep dancing or do we have to withdraw them? Because then that means they might not graduate with their friends. And like, there's a whole thing. So that's what I had to learn kind of quickly. Like, okay, I can't just say they can't dance. Like they have to keep doing something, even if I have to make something up for them in class, they have to keep moving because otherwise it's going to have different implications for them. So.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us, Fitness in Your Schedule.
Yeah.
And I think it's super cool what you're doing. That was educational for me, and again, we had some great questions there.
Yeah, they did.
But, yeah, I mean, that was some of the best ones we've had.
Yeah.
But before we go, I know you're from DC, and now you're in Mississippi, but you dealt with the same struggles that these young Black kids are dealing with as a kid. Even though we're in Mississippi, we're in Mississippi now, you were in Virginia. But I'll be the first person to say that being a young Black person in America is never going to be easy. But you're a perfect example of you can still become extremely successful. You can still make a great career and learn a great skill in a place where there's a need for diversity.
Yeah.
So what can they do now as ninth graders to be just as successful as someone like you, and even and keep following those footsteps?
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of a hard question. I think doing the best that you can. I think working really hard in the things that you have right now. So like in your schoolwork, doing the best that you can. Schoolwork is really hard, and yeah, we would rather be outside doing things with our friends, but it's really important for you to be able to do. You learn perseverance, you learn endurance, you learn all these different things that you don't think are going to be helpful right now, but can help you in the future. And so I think working hard in whatever it is that you have right now, whether that's a job, whether that's basketball practice, that's schoolwork, whatever it is. I'd also say if there's a particular job that you are really interested in, being able to maybe just reach out to them or reach out to like a teacher and just ask if, hey, can I come shadow you for a day just to see what you do? And she'd be like, I'm thinking I want to do this, but so then you can kind of get an idea instead of having to pay a whole bunch of money for maybe something that you really don't want to do. Being able to go shadow a whole bunch of different people and ask them questions. We've all been where you are. We've all been in high school not knowing what we want to do. And so I would hope that people like me, that we would want to give back and be able to answer those questions. So yeah, and I would just say, like I said, it's really hard. Life is hard. School is hard, but I would encourage you just not to give up. You have a purpose on this earth. God woke you up this morning for a reason. You have something that no one else will ever be able to give this world because there will never be anyone like you. So never forget that. Continue to work hard. Ask so many questions. There's never a dumb question. If you don't know, ask. And just know that you can do it. It's going to be hard, but you can do it.
No one's going to get mad at you for asking for help.
No, we've all had to ask them. I continue to ask questions. I don't know everything, and continue to learn. I mean, for the rest of your life, whether you're in school or not, whether you go to college or not, continue to learn because there's always something that we can learn. So yeah, and then if there's anyone that ever wants to come see where I work and kind of see what's up, Mr. Greg has my information. I'm totally down to just let you come and see what this world is like and answer questions. And
I mean, I want to come see your performance because I've heard a lot of great things myself. So
yeah,
I'll definitely make that happen soon. But thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
I need to get back to work, and I will see you soon, my friend.
Sounds good. Thank you.
See you.